Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators Football Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ben, joined as always by your other host, Randy. Randy, man, I mean, I got this smoking background behind me for those that are watching on the video. It is hot, both in temperature and in the figurative sense of the word in Gville. Goodness, the recruits are storming at the gate. What is going on? What is the vibe? How are things in Gaines, Vegas?
B, what's shaking, my man? It is absolutely palpable to see the orange and blue climb up the recruiting ranks, to see the blue chip numbers, just to see the activity. Man, I tell you what, it is getting Gator Nation going. That's for sure.
Yeah, without question. It has been a crazy couple of weeks. I don't even know how many commits we've had since the last pod, 6, maybe. It's at least 5. Might be 6. I'm not even sure. Heck, it might be 7. I can't keep up at this point.
No,
Sumrall and the boys getting work done on the recruiting trail here of late. Pretty impressive stuff. Obviously, we all know it's not done till it's final and signed on the dotted line and all that. And realistically, it's still not even done then. But but overall, you got to love the state that we're in, and we'll talk more about it, of
absolutely.
course. But tonight's pod is going over the identity crisis that has plagued the O-line here at Florida for over a decade. So that's the topic. That's what we want to go through, and we're going to talk about what can be done. Hopefully, some things. Hopefully, some of this recruiting is going to help. Certainly looks that way. We'll talk to that for sure. And what this new staff, including one Mr. Phil Trautwein, can do to help it. But really, what we're going to examine is the problem here and what's been going on really since the last time Florida had a title come to town, because that's really what it breaks down to. We've got some pretty interesting evidence we want to look at, and we'll go through all that. So without further ado, as always, our intro, our mission, our accuracy disclaimer, our vision, and our agenda, that alone is a mouthful at this point. But our mission is to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football. Our accuracy disclaimer is that our information will be accurate to the best of our possible ability. We will cite our sources whenever we use them, and all statistical data comes from either ESPN or stats.ncaa.org, and recruiting data comes from On3, though we will be using some other stuff tonight. I want to stress again on that just for a minute, because we have obviously changed over here, a different platform, maybe some different listeners. We do this because it is very important to us to have accuracy in our content as much as we possibly can. We still make mistakes. We try to correct them after the fact if we do make mistakes, but we try really hard for this information to be correct, because we see on a constant basis. Just the other day, I saw some things where we couldn't even figure out what number recruit somebody was. One person had him as 18, one had him at 20. It's actually the 19th recruiting class. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this isn't rocket science, people. But it apparently counting is a problem. But the at the end of the day, there's a lot of misinformation floating around out there, and we try very, very hard to not be a source of it. I'm not saying that it never happens, but we put every effort forward, and that's why we have that disclaimer and why we do that. So with that, on to the vision. That is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will be based on review of film, and while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions, as well as on-the-field execution. All right, so agenda for tonight. We're going to talk first about what once was, the last time the Gators really had a truly dominant O-line and what that looked like, give you some background on that and what kind of stats that was made up of. We'll then look at the start of the problem when that occurred, and then how it continued. We will then examine the Billy Napier era, yikes, what that looked like, even though we had 2 O-line coaches. And then finally, the broader fallout, and how bad offensive line play has really hurt the program over time, and some of the maybe larger implications of that maybe extend just beyond the fact that we, didn't play well, right? And what that cost in recruiting, some other things that have been involved. And then last but not least, we will look at, is the tide finally turning? Can we see this thing pointing up? Certainly, again, from a recruiting standpoint, it looks good right now. But how do we continue to build on that? How do we see things improve from a development standpoint? Moving forward, we'll take a look at what this current class looks like from a recruiting standpoint and what we think they are capable of, and then wrap things up from there. So with that, let's get things started. let's look over what once was and talk about the early, well, not early overall, but the domination that we did have at offensive line back during the Meyer era. So walk us through a little of that.
That was an amazing era, no doubt. So Urban comes over from Utah, and we're trying to figure out what to expect. But at the end of the day, he has this military-like mentality. He wants to play fast, spread option, doing a bunch of different things on the field. Phenomenal. And I think the biggest thing when you look at when he came in, he established a lot of different things, but main thing was tough blue collar trench play. And so at the end of the day, the Gators just dominated the line of scrimmage, right? When you look at some of these names I'm about to call out, um, the Pouncey twins, of course, our current O-line coach, Phil Trautwein, Marcus Gilbert, Carl Johnson, Jim Tart, Drew Miller, Steve Rissler, Carlton Metter. I mean, these names, it was amazing when you look at the continuity of these names, right? B, I'm just going to read off some of these names when you look at from the season standpoint. In '05, your starter at left tackle, Phil Trautwein, your left guard, Steve Rissler, your center, this name might ring a bell, Mike DeGore,
Oh,
right?
man, that's wild.
The pride of Brevard County there. Right guard, Tavares Washington. Right tackle, Randy Hand. To '06 season, Phil Troutway, left tackle. Jim Tart, left guard. Steve Rissler at center. Drew Miller at right guard. Carlton Metter at right tackle. '07 season, left tackle, Jason Watkins. Left guard, Jim Tart. Center, Drew Miller. The right guard, Marquise Pouncey or Mike Pouncey. And then right tackle, Carlton Metter. And then, of course, the '08 season, national champions, Phil was at left tackle, Carl Johnson at left guard, Marquise Pouncey at center, right guard Mike Pouncey, right tackle Marcus Gilbert. And it was just an amazing era of dominance that they produced, right?
Yeah.
In that Meyer era, you have 5.4 yards per carry and average 18 sacks per season. And uh, the best season of that came in 2008, where they averaged 5.8 yards per carry and only 14 sacks. Just absolutely phenomenal. And so when I think of that era, yeah, we had championships, we had great offense, but at the end of the day, they handled their business in the trenches. And I think you'd agree with that unequivocally.
Yeah, no question. And really interesting to hear, you hear so many of those names repeated, right, year after year. Obviously, some guys graduated, and moved on to other things, but that was the only reason. Now, obviously, we know transfer portal didn't exist then, wasn't, or well, not in the same instance anyway. I don't
Yeah.
think it existed at all. Maybe grad transfers only, but excuse me. But the ultimately, what we saw then was just a lot more continuity in things. And I understand that's harder to build now. We know that. But ultimately I think there can still be, kind of a core group of guys that can work together here and really build this thing out, and make it come together. We've seen alignment stick here even during this era, right? I mean, Barber and Slaughter were both fifth year seniors, I'm pretty sure. At least Barber was. I don't know if Slaughter was because he may not
At
have
least,
gotten, but no, they were in the same recruiting class, so they both were. Yeah. So I mean, those guys both made it, through all the different years and seasons and everything else, and did either 4 or 5 years. I don't remember if they were both fifth year, but regardless, the point being is they all stuck here, and some of the better players that we've had even in recent times, they have stuck around and stayed, and so I think you can potentially do that on the line. If you look, not a lot of the higher profile, better O linemen really transfer, right? It's not a position you can really win that often in the transfer portal. It happens, right? We all know Seton transferred, right? We saw that happen, but like it is not something that is super common, right? You don't see that happening at the rate you do with wide receiver or running back or quarterback, even, right? You just don't see that kind of movement at the position, especially for the higher end quality guys, right? So if you can get the high end quality talent in and build and develop it, odds are you're going to keep a lot of it, right? At
yeah.
least the way things currently are. We'll see if that maintains. Everything's fluid right now, as we know, right? But as it stands right now, that's how it looks. So anyway, but just good to reflect on that, and we'll kind of show a graph later that kind of looks at everything when we break this thing down. But for the time being, that's a good kind of breakdown of what it looked like then. Then the problems begin, right? So starts off with Muschamp and some of the recruiting woes he had, despite the fact that he's an excellent recruiter overall, right? He really just focused too much on the defense, right? That was always the knock on him. We often lacked classes with sufficient offensive line or offensive talent in general, right? And this really happened with only a handful of blue chips coming in during his 4 years. We had 1 5-star and 4 4 stars, despite having 3 top 10 recruiting classes. So that's of the O line, right? 1 5-star and 4 4 stars in 3 top 10 recruiting classes that he had during that time. So great recruiting classes, right? Top tens, and I think one of them might have even been top 5. Pretty sure it was. But we get 1 5-star and 4 4 stars out of that entire time, that entire 3-year period that we're talking about. Not great, right? Then it gets worse when you get into McElwain and the depth crisis we experienced there, right? The highlight there was an infamous spring practice in 2015 where Florida had only 6 scholarship offensive linemen even available to play, right? So he had to work on this whole patchwork idea to, piece things together on the line, both in the beginning of the season and then throughout it. And that kind of started to become a little bit of the culture, right? So that was really an issue, and it really continued to be an issue. And I would argue it even kind of progressed into Mullen. So give me your thoughts on that, and then I'll bring up the chart and we'll kind of talk about the differences in the era before we get into some of the stuff from Billy.
Absolutely. Just to backpedal real quick, you are accurate. So Barber and Slaughter, 5th year.
Okay,
So that's accurate. So you're good to go
cool.
there. Um, Here's the funny thing about Muschamp, right? I like what you said there, right? Coach Boom, we know what he did at Texas. We know what a good coordinator he is, right? But when it came to, again, the CEO, the head coach, just he didn't have it in those areas. I'll point out a couple of things. I'll go a level deeper. In the 2011 recruiting class, you had Trip Thurman, 4-star interior offensive lineman out of Dover, Delaware. That's it. 2012, DJ Humphreys, there's your 5-star offensive tackle, right? Rated the #1 offensive tackle in the nation, #3 prospect in the 2012 class. Outside of that, in the 2012 class, you had Jessamine Dunker, 4-star. That was it. 2013 class, get this. In the 2013 class, Muschamp signed 5 guys to the offensive line. However, all of them were either 2 or 3-star. Not a single blue chip. And then 2014, David Sharp was a 4-star offensive tackle. Okay. And then Trevor Darling, 4-star offensive tackle. That was it. So not a lot of productivity there. That definitely did not help him when you look at everything that transpired there. And then McElwain, gosh, McElwain was so tough because he came into the team. I want to say there were 8 scholarship players, and then that spring, okay, now veteran Trip Thurman, nagging shoulder injury. He was out the entire spring, was very limited in fall camp, and the next thing you know, you've got Roderick Johnson, who was going to be a stud, suffered an injury. Guess what? It ended up being a spinal stenosis. I believe that's what happened to
Sumrall
in Kentucky, right? So you had that, and he had to go in. He altered as much as he could. He tried to get what he could, but at the end of the day, it was just so inefficient what he got. Yeah, he ended up having 15 or so players on the line, but it just ended up being an absolute nightmare because I remember when he came in, we won the East, but at the end of the day, it just there was a lot of other pieces around that masked the bigger problem that was.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let's take a look at some data evidence of this. Let me get this up here.
Yeah, please. Let's see that chart.
All right.
Very
So,
telling.
yeah, so we mapped this out. Graph here again. For those that aren't watching the video, you're not going to see it obviously, but the basically what it's breaking down is we have the bar graph each year for how many yards per carry we had, right? And you can see as I scroll over it what the different ratings were for each yard, and then the sacks allowed is this line, right? That's going up and down. And so basically what you see is if you're looking at it during the Meyer era, the yards per carry always covers the sacks, right? So like it's always higher, right, as it's represented here. In other words, you're always pretty much over 5 yards per carry, with that one exception being 2010 at 4.8, and then 25 sacks. So that was by far the worst year in Meyer's era here. But you're basically seeing it always covered up, right? It's always underneath what the yards per carry were in terms of what's allowed. Whereas in all the other eras, all of Muschamp, all
That's
of
a
McElwain, right? And then most of Mullen, there were a couple where it wasn't, and then most of Napier, again, a couple where it wasn't. But this is contributed. This is an outlier year for sure because it was Richardson, right? And this was Richardson
scrambling.
and right. So again, not necessarily indicative because those guys could scramble so well, right? 18 is a good year. This is a solid year, right? Because we did not have. I mean, it's Franks, but well, Franks and Trask, I guess, right? But
Yeah.
we did, or did Trask come in 19? Trask came in 19. So no, it's just Franks. So Franks, this is Franks. So again, relatively mobile, but not as mobile. So this is pretty good, right? This is a solid year in 18. But the rest of these are mirage years, and we'll talk more about that later. But what it's really showing you is that you really got outside the lines here, if you will, right? The yards per carry dropping, the sacks rising, right? With this high point here at 45 sacks allowed in 2015, combined with 3.7 yards per carry. Yikes. That is horrific, right? And then you kind of see how it flows on from there, right? Some up and down and everything else. Obviously 23 also not a good year at all. 19 not a good year actually. That was when we couldn't run the ball at all with with Trask. So anyway, just some interesting stuff here. Now these grades down here we don't necessarily fully agree with, and we'll get into why and some of that stuff. But again, a couple of these seasons being very not indicative, but we'll talk more to that. But anyway, any thoughts on this before we move on from it?
Data don't lie.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
really hard. You can point to recruiting, you can point to this, you can point to scapegoats, you can point to scheme, but at the end of the day, when you look at this raw data as it pertains to yards per carry, the sack number, and the overall success of that line and what it means to the overall offense, yeah, there's no disputing it.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said for sure. All right. Take that back down and we will continue on here and talk some Billy Napier, two O-line coaches. Yes, yes. So huh, let's talk about having two O-line coaches and not having an O-line, shall we? Um, we start out with 2023, 2024 here. Actually, let's start with 2022. Let's back up to that, what we saw on the graph there. As we mentioned, total mirage year there, right? If you look, uh, Richardson led the team in yards per carry,
Yes,
right?
he
He was
did.
the second leading rusher, I believe, on the team that year. And obviously, he didn't have a lot of sacks because he could escape everything. He was the wizard back there. It's where he got drafted fourth overall, right? So, like, right or wrong, that's why it happened, right? That and testing through the roof at the combine. But like when we look at it, that's what really happened here in terms of why that era was made to look better, why it was given a B minus, and kind of the same thing with Mullen, right? He had two good years on the chart there, if you will. 18 being an actual decent year, right, in terms of O-line play. 21, not necessarily, because again, you had two mobile quarterbacks, guys that could escape and run away if they did get into trouble, and also were able to get extra yards per carry because they were both mobile quarterbacks, right? And I'm not saying that mobile quarterbacks don't count or aren't, allowed to be a part of this. Certainly, that's fine, and you can have an offense that plays that way. But ultimately, we weren't playing like a full on, you know, a quarterback option type offense the whole time. We had some of those plays, sure, but it wasn't like most of the offense was set up or designed that way to where we were running like a ton of designed quarterback runs. There were some, but it wasn't like it was, predicated on that, right? So when you look at that, I think that's where those numbers become a little disingenuous, right? You're getting credit for all those yards that they ran, a lot of them being improvised, right? And I think that's where that comes in. Then you take it a step further and we talk about the absolutely horrific 23 and 24 uh, piece of this thing, right? So 132nd out of 133 in terms of FBS ranking in blown run blocking assignments for 2023. 20.5% of the plays blown. That was Gators Online stat, right? Or was that
Yikes.
Hail? That might have been Hail Florida Hail.
I don't recall. I'll
I
find
don't
it.
remember which the source was. I don't have it cited here. I apologize. It's one of the two. I'm sure of it. But either way, the point being is we were 132nd out of 133 teams in 2023 for blown run blocking assignments. If you remember, that was not a good year for run blocking on the team. It did not go well. The pass blocking improved some. It was kind of the same issue that's been going on, right? Couldn't run the ball. Better at pass blocking, but it's still a lot of struggles with run blocking, right? And that kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? Because when you pass block, you just kind of get there and hold your position. When you run block, you got to be aggressive, get downhill, get after those guys, right? And that was something where we just weren't seeing the talent, the strength, right? Certainly some of the strength and conditioning, right? And some of those things really being an issue. And on top of that, with that issue of run blocking, we still had Graham Mertz. I said pass blocking was better. It really wasn't that year because we still had Graham Mertz having to handle 39 sacks that season, right? So that was a real terrible year under Napier. And then obviously things did get better in 2024. They started to improve. And so we thought come 2025, as you heard us talk about all last offseason, that the offensive line is going to turn the corner. They're going to be better. We got a group of continuity, what we were just talking about. It's going to get better. And then, of course, that did not occur in any way.
Egg on face.
Really, really, really bad. Yeah. So I'm a little hesitant to give the stat of what we graded out at for the 0.2 in pass blocking in the Miami game in 2025, because I got a tip recently that Pro Football Focus grades on offensive line may not be the most reliable things. But I got to say, if you're getting a 0.2 out of 100, you clearly weren't doing something right. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. We'll leave it at that. So, what are your thoughts on the Napier era there?
My thoughts on Napier era, trying to forget it as quickly as possible, but you had to bring me back to the PTSD as we were going through the
Yeah, sorry
agenda
about
for
that.
this pod. No, you're correct. It was Hail Florida Hail on the
Oh, okay.
citation. So that's good. Outside of that, it's really tough because, you know, I look at some of the great run performances that we had under Napier. Okay, the very few run performances that we had under Napier, and the one that really sticks out is the Tennessee game in the swamp, where we
Yeah.
absolutely mutilated them and won that game by halftime.
Yep.
Outside of that, there were a lot of disguises. There were a lot of what ifs. Obviously, after Kingsley went down and Jake had the helm there at center, we thought he was going to be a phenomenal anchor for that O line, and he was. But again, he is one position. You can only do so much. You've got left tackle, left guard, right tackle, right guard to worry about. And we had a lot of ins and outs with those positions, a lot of rotations. And for whatever reason, we just couldn't do what we were supposed to do. And you wonder how you're scratching your head. You're like, okay, the talent is not there of a Georgia, of an Alabama, and schools like that. Fine, no problem. But we are serviceable. We have two O-line coaches. And in addition to that, you have an offensive coordinator and head coach who is pretty much heavily involved with the O-line because of the scheme he ran. So to see the abhorrent, I'll use
Yep.
that term, abhorrent play that we got out of that, in addition to everything, because when you look at Graham especially, and Graham came in, Graham did as best as he could, right? Point blank. He
Yep.
had 39 sacks in 23.
Mhm.
That's close to that 2015 number of 45. So
Yeah.
right there enough as it is, it just showed some of the things that AR was able to mask. I like what you called out there back in that season because he scrambled. I mean, point blank, it was what it was. He escaped the pocket many, many times because I remember even in the first Georgia game that he had, I just prayed that he would not get hit because if he got hit, uh, we could have a big problem here, Houston. So either way, it was just Billy Napier and the two O line coaches incumbent just
Not great.
didn't help it.
Not great for sure. And yeah, that 39 sack mark, just so you know, was the second highest dating back on this entire thing, other than that 45 year in 2015. So
That's all.
second mark that we had. The other being Trask slash Franks, right? The combo in 19, having 37. And I'm saying the combo, but maybe it was only Trask. I can't remember if Franks went down at the end of 18 or the end of 19. I can't recall, but either way. So
But again, regardless of the fact, it's an absolute indictment when you have two O-line coaches and you keep preaching the process or
yep.
patience, and this is going to happen, and we're going to go back and take a look at the film. We're going to go back and take a look at this. We're going to get our, we're going to get our leadership team on it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to confer about it. Give me a break.
Well, and then how about execution, right? To add insult to injury, let's talk about execution a little bit in that time frame, right? And not that it's ever been necessarily a huge strength here, because penalties I feel like have been a concern for Florida for as long as I can remember. But typically they were more on the pre-snap side of things, right? A lot of pre-snap stuff with false starts or offsides on defense. And not to say that we didn't have any others, but like I feel like holding was not one that we got flagged for near as much as we did in these past few years, right? So right, wrong, indifferent, right? Not getting into the officiating quality. We talk enough about that during the season. But just talking about what actually did get flagged, man, it felt like we got an awful lot of holding penalties over these past few years, didn't it? I mean, am I wrong there? Am I thinking of this incorrectly, or did it just seem like we got a whole lot more holding calls these past few years? And maybe I know holding happens every play, right? Every defensive lineman says it.
Yeah.
Every offensive lineman does it, whatever the case might be. But maybe we were just not good at coaching them how to not have it look like holding. I don't know, whatever it was. But we were bad at it. That's all I know. it was not fun to see or watch. That's for sure. So
not at all.
Anyway, so that's probably the final piece and the final, nail in the coffin. Certainly not for Billy overall, but certainly as it relates to the O-line play for sure.
How many big plays, explosive plays that Jaden got called back because of a hold?
Oh man, there were like 4 alone last year. I think he got called out in end zone 3 times.
3 to 4 come to my mind just from last season. So
yeah, one against LSU that was a killer.
Oh.
Anyway, all right, moving along. Broader fallout from this, right? What was the impact? And I'll let you kind of lead this to start. What was the bigger impact of this? How did this hurt the program beyond just the fact that obviously the O-line play wasn't good and that led to sacks and less, yards per carry, right? What's the greater fallout here?
So a couple things, and we didn't mention this earlier, but I'm going to take it back a little further, right? So obviously Meyer and company, but when you look at what the Gators did in the 90s, what Steve Spurrier did in the 90s, those teams were built off a lot of different things. But I tell you what, when Werfel and Johnson and Matthews threw the football, they needed time to throw the football, and they had time to throw the football. This might sound silly, but as long as a quarterback has 2.5, 2.7, 2.8 seconds, and they can process and they can go down a check 1, a check 2, check down to third, whatever. Listen, your options open up a lot. Your success rate opens up a lot. If that quarterback has less than 2 seconds to process, you have a bigger problem, right? And so the thing you have there is, call it quarterback ruin, whatever you want to call it. The average sacks allowed each year in coaching staff since Meyer had been higher, and not to mention lacked the consistency based off that chart that you showed earlier. So that didn't help at all. The second thing is when you look at what Spurrier established in the 90s and what Meyer established in 6 short years. We talked about this in a pod last year. What's Florida's identity? Right? You definitely had an identity loss when it came to the balance, right? Weak line play chokes out the run game, right? And then when you drop the team, overall, when that happens, the team dropped to a sub 3.5 yards per carry in major SEC contests over the past few years. And that source was for Gators Online. So in SEC play, where the trenches matter most, you have 3.5 yards per carry. Well, guess what that means? You are punting the ball an awful lot and you're not moving the ball whatsoever, right? So those things just kind of manifest and just have exacerbated the issue of moving the football. And especially during the Napier era, we had no greater issue. Well, I can think of a few, but no greater issue than
lot of great issues.
moving the football efficiently. And if you move the football, you will score points. And as we know in the Napier era, especially, there was an issue with scoring points. And
Yep.
so when you look at that broader foul out, it did not help recruiting on the quarterback side. It
Yep.
did not help in the run game. It did not help with the overall scoring offense. And it sure as hell did not help play complementary football. And so it also affects the defense side of the football. So it's just such a broad foul out. It doesn't make sense.
Yep. No, absolutely. And obviously that extends back long before Napier with some of this, as we've already mentioned, right? And I think you've seen it impact recruiting, I think is probably the biggest thing, as you mentioned, at multiple different positions. It's hard to get good O linemen recruited when you don't show that you can develop and improve them, right? I think maybe of the four coaches mentioned since Meyer, Mullen probably did do the best job there, like it or don't, right, with Hevesy and that, whole situation. But because there's some questionable things there, I think, when you talk about culture and some stuff that was going on. However, the O-line development there was not the worst, right? He also then did have some decent recruits at the end of that time, having been the person who actually recruited Slaughter and Barber. But aside from those two, if you go back and look at the history there of recruits under that time period, it's not great. We called out some specifics under Muschamp. We didn't do the same for McElwain or Mullen, but man, it is not terrific, the recruiting that was going on, especially at O-line. I mean, the recruiting in general wasn't terrific under Mullen, as we know, but like it was also not terrible, for the record. I think he gets beat up a little bit too much for that. Maybe it was never like outside the top 20 or anything, so it wasn't horrible, but it also was not stellar for sure. Especially not compared to what we are seeing right now. That is something we're going to get to in just a second here, but yeah. So we'll move on and let's look at what things are moving to. Is the tide finally turning? So looking at this year and then of course beyond, what do we have going on? What's happening? Obviously, first and foremost, staff shakeup. Can Big Philly style get us out of this hole? I'm affectionately naming him that. I love what he has done so far. Can he bring together a unified front here that is actually playing, 5 as 1, the whole thing that always gets talked about on the offensive line? Can he find that right 5, get them developed properly, even starting this year, right? Even working with a cupboard that is not full, right? It's not bare, but it's not full, right? We've had some changes and stuff that we'll talk about here, obviously due to graduation, not having Barber, not having Slaughter, right? We'll talk to that. But I'll tell you what, step one is building for the future. And oh my goodness, are we doing that? If you're somehow under a rock and not aware, this is what is going on with recruiting. And I will share this right now here. These are your 247 composite stats. There we go. Dating back to 2004. This was Trautwein's class, obviously, back in 2004, and their ranks, right? So you see 4-star 53, 4-star 202, 4-star 310. Then in 2005, we had 189 overall, 207 overall, 238 overall, all 4-star. 2007, you had 18 overall, 222 overall, and 281 overall. You may not have known the Pounceys were not even top 200 recruits. Kind of interesting. They were pretty good. So Green doesn't always get that right. But it was still kind of new here, right? This just started right around this time frame. But that was the 2007 class. 2012, there was a DJ Humphreys one you referenced, right? Also Jessamine Dunker, who was a top. So here's 2 top 100, right? That's that up until now was probably the best class that Florida's ever had from a recruiting profile standpoint at O-line, because you had Quintez Williams as well at 216. Until now, 4 in the top 150, 2 in the top 100. And Rivals matches this, by the way. Slightly different rankings. Hiller's 3 on both. Rivals has Elijah at 91. Peyton's like 130, and Kennedy's like 120 28, maybe. It's somewhere right around this same ballpark. So they're basically aligned on these numbers. And then the individual player rankings might not be the same, but overall, they're basically the same. So 4 in the top 150. So not only is this better, it's way better. I mean, it's not even close, right? We are annihilating anything we've done. Now, again, it's not done. It's not over. These guys aren't signed, right? These guys all signed. Will these guys all sign? We don't know yet. We hope so. I certainly think odds are good for getting probably 3 of them. And even 3 of them, you could make an argument if it's the right 3 is still the best class we've ever had, right? So it's pretty impressive stuff. It's pretty impressive stuff. And frankly, they're not done. They're still talking about other recruits they want to get into the building. So it's pretty amazing what is going on with this, what Phil has been able to do already. And he's even been able to do it with guys that weren't necessarily in his pipeline. Kennedy is the one that is maybe on the fence here now after going to Georgia. But regardless, he wasn't in his pipeline. Like Phil wasn't talking to him at Penn State. This wasn't somebody he had a relationship with prior. So really, really interesting stuff. Any thoughts on that before I stop sharing here?
No, you're good. Go ahead and stop it. Here's the thing, folks. He's proven as a player, he knows what it takes to be at that level. He obviously did the best he could at Penn State to help James Franklin, right? And with his job up there, they couldn't score enough points, couldn't win the bigger games. But regardless of the fact, one man, one position, and he doesn't need help, right? And he's doing the job, and he's doing it well beyond any 2 O-line coach system ever had.
Well said, sir. Well said.
Right?
Yes,
And
indeed.
so you can call him Big Philly style. I'll call him, just like when you're going fishing, you catch a really, really nice lake trout, a big old monster. Like I'll just call him Lake Trout from now on.
Right. I like it.
Because he is getting the job done. He took the message from Sumrall and he knew exactly what his mission was. He has one job. This is what you need to do for my O-line, for our O-line to get to where we need to be. And I tell you what, all marks across the board, he is doing the job without fail.
Yeah, it's definitely so far so good. So obviously recruiting is only one piece of it. We've also got to develop. So let's talk about what that looks like. What are we working with going into this year? So one thing we wanted to break down here before we wrap this thing up is let's talk about the current state of the line, looking at the spring roster, looking at who kind of played or has the opportunity to play in all likelihood, even with those departures that we have, right, from graduation and guys moving on. What are we looking at this year? Are we going to have a better cohesive group, or are we going to be more growing pains, trying to figure it out type of situation that we've been dealing with for I don't know how long anymore. It seemed like we thought we were going to get out of that last year. Like we said, I don't know. We obviously did not. I don't know if we're in for more of it this year. We don't really know the answer to this question for the record, but we wanted to look at the recruiting profile of the guys that are currently on the roster. We did use 247 for this because it was easier to find the historical profile for all these guys because obviously we had to look back at their original ranking and it was easier to find the individual player rankings by doing this when we were citing them. So these are 247 rankings that we're using here. But we wanted to break down each one just briefly. We're not going to go into some detailed breakout, but just so you all know, like what the line is currently made up of in terms of guys that could actually play. We don't have everybody on here, and I say actually play. We never know. There might be a surprise that we don't expect, but we think these are your likely ones that are going to potentially see the field, right? So, having said that, why don't you get us started with Fletcher there?
Yeah, Fletcher Westfall, red shirt sophomore, plenty of eligibility, 4-star, ranked out 128 nationally, and number 12 in the offensive tackle room.
Yep, he was the highest ranked recruit Napier ever got at offensive line, 128. Phil comes in, gets number 3. Just pointing that out. Okay, moving along. And I should say Phil. It's not like Napier got them. It was Sale and DeCoster and
Sure.
Oh God, what was your other O-line coach? I forgot he left before. It doesn't matter. It wasn't important.
Correct.
I forgot who it was now. That's how important it was. All right. So yeah, highest recruit we ever had under him was Fletcher Westfall. And I think probably a pretty decent player. He struggled with some injuries. That's why he redshirted. That and of course just kind of some developmental stuff. A lot of guys do redshirt. Um, did not play in the spring. Not sure if he's going to be healthy enough to play in the fall. We'll have to see. I hope he is. I hope he could potentially get in because his talent profile is one that he should be good enough to potentially crack the rotation somewhere. But we'll see. Next up, TJ Dice, redshirt freshman, redshirted last year, obviously, 4-star, 167th nationally, and 19th overall rated tackle in the 2026 class? No, 25 class. This would have been.
Right.
Yep. Similar thoughts there. Good amount of upside, but don't know really what the potential is yet with that. So moving on.
Definitely. And by the way, the other name that was easily to forget was Darnell Stapleton. So
Thank you. Yes, Stapleton. Yes.
returning Nigel Harris, senior, 4-star, ranked out 177 nationally, number 12 interior offensive lineman in that room.
Yep, by far the most productive recruit of the Napier era. Excuse me. Now a 2-year starter, going on 3. 2-year player on the line, certainly. I think 2-year starter. I believe that's correct. So this will be his 3rd year starting. So this is a guy who has had that continuity. Solid piece here. Really do think he can develop. Even played some as a freshman a little bit. Really good get here. Even though he's not the highest rated, he was probably the best one that we've actually had in terms of production, I would say. Next up, Caden Jones, redshirt junior, 3-star. He was 675 national, number 64 offensive tackle. Interesting that he ended up being a starter last year with that as the recruiting profile. Not that it can't happen, certainly. For those that don't know, both Barber and Slaughter. Slaughter was in the 700s. I think Barber was in the 500s. So certainly those guys, again, can be developed, can play better, everything else. But Caden obviously has had his struggles. We'll see if he actually does start or not. He was the lesser of 2 evils last year at right tackle. So we'll see how that goes and if he ends up getting the nod or not.
For real. After that, we got Bryce Lovett, another red shirt junior, plenty of eligibility. Get this, number 1017 nationally and number 89 in the interior offensive lineman room. But Bryce has shown sparks here. He's got the abilities to do it. My main thing with Bryce is work ethic and consistency. If you can get those 2 things, which I'm sure Phil can get out of him or at least push out of him, I hope to see a big jump from Bryce this fall in his consistency in play.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I like the move to guard here. If it happens, again, don't know if he's going to start, but it looks like he is going to move to guard. I think that's a better position for him than tackle. I think it suits him better. So I'm interested to see if he can do something there. So, all right. Next up, Roderick Kearney. This one is tough for me. This is a highly ranked prospect, 256 overall, number 16th interior offensive lineman, 4-star, and really a guy who I thought would play more. He's been hurt of late, but seemed like he did play some last year, got hurt some then, I think, too, was hurt in spring camp again this year. I just don't know if he's going to be available enough to play. I think he's got the talent, certainly, to back up either center or guard. He's definitely got, the ability there, but we'll just have to see what happens.
Definitely. Speaking of, Jason Zandamela, red shirt sophomore. This guy, 4-star, 195th nationally, and number 13 interior offensive lineman in that room. Expected some big things out of this kid, and just between health, between consistency of play, it just a lot of things. Unfortunately, a lot of perfect storms that have derailed, I think, his development. But boy, he sure looked like he had the physical abilities coming out of high school. The film on him was very good. The feet was good. The hands were good. The size is very good, and just has not had the developmental piece and also the health piece.
Yeah, originally committed to USC, I believe. Got him as a transfer, possibly, originally when we got him. I don't know if it qualified as a transfer or if he came in as a recruit because they let him out of his NLI. I don't know what the detail was. I don't remember, I should say, what it was. But ultimately, definitely a decently highly rated prospect, obviously. And again, like you said, the film looked like he had some real upside. Hasn't developed yet, but he's only a redshirt sophomore, where he's still got a few years left of eligibility. So we have to see if something comes of that. He was kind of back and forth with Harrison as far as maybe being the starter or not at center. It looks like that's probably going to be Harrison now from what we're hearing, but we'll have to see. And certainly he could be in the rotation this year. So be good to see him get some play time and what that looks like. All right. TJ Shanahan Jr., first transfer in the bunch here, 4-star originally, 287, number 16 interior offensive lineman. First Penn State transfer on the list. Obviously came down with Phil. Looking like he could actually play, even though he was recruited as an interior offensive lineman. Looks like he could even end up playing some tackle potentially. We really our issues on this line are not interior; they're exterior, right? The tackles are the concern right now. I think interior we're pretty shored up. We have maybe even a decent two deep at the guard, both guard spots and the center. So it is the tackles that are the question, and so I think we might even potentially see Shanahan move out to tackle. That is potentially possible with his size and ability to potentially play it, even though he was not recruited at that position. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Speaking of transfer from Penn State, we've got
Yep.
Egan Boyer, a redshirt sophomore, even more eligibility. 3-star, number 460 national, number 35 in the offensive tackle room. Lake Trout got himself another good one because Egan's got a lot of development to do, and clearly Phil's been in his ear. He is going to be able to channel him for many, many years to come because he has that size. He's got great hands. Looks like he has decent feet. I think he's got better hands than he does feet. So as far as
Yep.
that goes, some developmental work to be done there.
Yep, for sure. And thus being the concern, because obviously at tackle, you got to have the feet, and we got to see what goes on there. But that's well said on him. All right. Next transfer on the list from Georgia Tech is Harrison Moore. He is a junior, 3-star. He was not ranked, or at least could not find the ranking on this when we pulled it up. Obviously, though, came in for Georgia Tech as a full starter last year and was in the rotation the year prior, so plenty of playing experience here. And obviously did a good job blocking for a running quarterback, which is puts a little more on the center, right? Obviously, because they have to move things a little more, especially if they're trying to open up that A gap, right? For the quarterback, they have to be able to do that relatively quickly on those quarterback designed runs. So I think a good get here. Obviously, always a center is important, very important actually, because they're the ones that typically call out the protections, right, for the offense. And him being familiar with Buster's offense is going to be something that does help play a part here for us being able to transition, I think, effectively, functionally, efficiently, all those good, happy buzzwords there, to this new system, and still be good with it. So again, the center is the one who usually helps kind of call those things out if they need to change or shift a protection package for the quarterback. It's the center's job typically to do that. So very important. I think to get Harrison over here, and from all accounts, he's doing just fine. So we'll see what happens there. So last on the list, who you got?
Yeah, we got Emeka Ugorji, true sophomore, 3-star, not ranked, no national ranking, transferred from Stanford. So obviously, whatever he put on film, despite his limited snaps at Stanford, Phil liked, and Phil said, you know what, I can do something with that. He's got this, whatever those traits are. Definitely the size is there. It looks like the footwork is there. I'm not sure about anything else, but clearly Phil looked at that and said, I can work with that.
Yeah, I think the book on him is obviously that well, I shouldn't say obviously, but he got called into duty because of an injury, right? He ended up starting for like the back half of the season out there, and had some struggles as a true freshman, right?
Yeah.
Not many true freshmen, especially playing tackle, right? That's not common. But he was actually called on to do it and to start and to play a lot of games doing it, and didn't have the best ratings or numbers or whatever. But I think to your point, Phil saw something there that he could work with, and I believe, if memory serves, we saw him as the starting tackle in spring game. For what that's worth, may not
What
mean
is
anything, may mean something. We'll see. We'll find out.
yeah.
But there's potential development there, and the biggest jump typically that you see for an offensive lineman in college is from that freshman to that sophomore year, right? It's when they get the most strength put on is during that year and during that second off season, right? And they're
Right.
usually able to develop the most at the position. Things start making more sense and clicking to them. They get more, practice time and all those things. That's usually when you see, if you're going to have a good one, that's usually when they develop and come in and start being, able to play and come into their own and all that good stuff. So doesn't necessarily mean that's a mecca, but we'll see what happens. So with
Or
that,
the other
go
thing
ahead.
is
Sorry.
that they could be playing Moneyball and saying, hey, you know what? This could
Yeah,
be
that's right. you,
We're not
you
gonna
got
pay
the
this much
old
for
money
this
ball.
episode.
I don't know what kind of money ball we're throwing around to get these recruits, man. But hey, I love it. I love it. I don't know. The somebody tipped the piggy bank over on the NIL budget, but hey, I'll take it.
Right.
Let's do it. So with that, we're gonna wrap things up here. Want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in. As always, if you like the content, please hit the like button, hit subscribe if you want to hear more of it. Still working on trying to continue to grow this thing, and yeah, we just do it for the love and passion we have for Gator football, and really appreciate all the support we get. Let us know your thoughts if you want. Drop us a comment. Be happy to hear it and give you feedback on it, and maybe even put something in a future pod for it if it is something we can do. So at any rate, I'll turn it over to you to wrap us up and sign us off, man.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, man, enjoy doing this. This is a good form of therapy, and I like what you said in the past pods. We're looking at this season coming up, very pivotal season. Is there a changing of the tide? No reference to Alabama, but at the end of the
No,
day, right? We were so hopeful for Napier. We were rooting for Napier
yeah,
until that last year, and so really true with the way we gauge how this fall is going to go, right? We're going to call a spade a spade. We'll do those things. But at the end of the day, it's always good to talk through it, especially for the love that we have for this Gator team and Gator football. And it is truly a form of therapy. So thank you for taking my blood pressure down about 10 to 15 points. That was good because right now it's pure excitement for what's happening on the recruiting trail. So
yeah, man, absolutely. It is fire out there for sure.
definitely, definitely. And outside of that, keep a lookout. Our next pod we've got coming up on the 23rd of June. So right now we've got a couple of topics that we're kicking around, kicking the can on around. We're going to get you more information on that shortly, but either way, it's coming sooner than later.
Yep.
But to that end, wherever you are, whenever you may be listening, we thank you so much for taking the time, and we will see you around Gator Nation.